What does it feel like to look at a post-operative surgical scar in your mirror every single morning, knowing you willingly let a medical team cut open your own flesh to transplant your kidney into your husband's dying body, only to realize the very pulse you restored was being used to conduct a secret relationship with your closest lifelong friend? It doesn't open with a frantic emotional screaming match in a hospital corridor. It begins with the absolute cold mechanical stillness of an unallocated network security log in a Manhattan medical tower and the freezing, absolute clarity that settles in your chest when you realize the man whose life you saved has filed a cynical divorce petition just months after his laboratory metrics cleared the danger sector. I didn't lose my balance, I didn't drop my surgical instruments, and I didn't shed a single tear onto the legal documents. I simply walked into the New York Superior Court, demanded the immediate physical return of my biological organ or an absolute $1.5 million compliance restitution, and executed a quiet, systematic legal liquidation that would strip him of his entire financial footprint, destroy his public status, and ensure the entire elite medical community blacklisted his name from the industry permanently. Let me show you how a precise, detail-oriented surgeon can turn a profound biological betrayal into an immediate, absolute execution of justice without ever raising her pitch. My name is Dr. Avery. I am 27 years old. If you saw me managing the high-precision automated surgical instruments and logistical medical logs behind the double monitors at a prominent university hospital in the Upper District of Manhattan, New York, you would see a highly precise, completely methodical woman. I have striking, short, icy platinum blonde hair that I keep styled in a clean, modern asymmetrical bob cut, piercing emerald green eyes that have spent years monitoring microcellular tolerances, and a life measured entirely by the unyielding laws of data verification and structural documentation. I didn't inhabit a disorganized world where things happened by accident or emotional impulse. My home was a custom-designed, contemporary luxury penthouse located in an upscale sector of Manhattan, a space built on years of absolute, simple devotion and a rigid lifestyle pattern that I believed was completely secure. I managed our shared accounts, monitored our network firewalls, and organized our property investments with the exact same mathematical precision I used to protect trauma patients from systemic failure. I believed that this transparent routine was a total shield against the world. To our professional and social circle, my marriage to Julian was the absolute benchmark of a stable, deeply aligned modern partnership. We didn't have separate financial silos, hidden luxury assets, or unresolved domestic friction, but our entire lifestyle was thrown out of alignment when Julian was diagnosed with an aggressive, terminal stage 4 renal collapse. His laboratory metrics were deteriorating at an exponential rate. His name was buried deep at the bottom of the National Organ Transplant Registry, and the medical directors confirmed he had less than 6 months of operational capacity remaining. I looked at the data deviation, bypassed my own physical safety boundaries, and entered the surgical queue as a direct, live donor match to save his pulse. My husband, Julian, was 30. He was a senior commercial asset manager at a boutique real estate investment firm, a man whose charm was smooth, calculated and immensely effective with high-net-worth developers. He was broad-shouldered with a wardrobe full of premium, custom-tailored clothes, dark hair that he kept perfectly groomed for high-end corporate dinners, and a confident, easy laugh that made him highly popular at the local country clubs. He was the model of a fiercely dedicated, grateful partner during his early treatment cycles. When the surgical director confirmed that my left kidney was a perfect immunological match, Julian wept openly against my shoulder, swearing on his recovery that his restored life would be a permanent monument to our shared devotion. He always positioned himself as the primary guardian of our future equity, constantly reminding everyone that my grueling 12-hour surgical shifts at the Manhattan hospital block were the direct engine expanding our lifestyle. I trusted that sharp professional pride implicitly. He wasn't a reckless gambler. He was a man who lived by legal timelines and market data, and I believed that a man whose entire existence had just been rescued by his wife's biological sacrifice couldn't possibly possess the chaotic, reckless cruelty required to forge an alternative lifestyle inside his own home. I offered him an absolute, unvarnished loyalty, letting them wheeled me into the operating theater where a 3-hour nephrectomy cut through my muscle layers to harvest the organ that would rebuild his future. I completely ignored my own recovery pain, entirely unaware that the man carrying my biology was using his renewed strength to execute a total liquidation of my emotional stability. The secondary parameter in this structural anomaly was Victoria. Victoria had been my closest neighbor and confidant since our university days, a woman who managed her luxury interior design firm with a superficial, chaotic charm that Julian and I had spent years stabilizing through business loans, financial advice, and professional recommendations. She possessed access codes to our private penthouse under the administrative agreement that she would manage our household logistics and monitor Julian's post-operative medication schedules while I was stuck performing emergency trauma shifts at the Manhattan hospital block. I viewed her as a biological extension of my own identity, a sister in survival. I remember sitting on our veranda during the previous spring gala, watching Victoria hand Julian his post-transplant care logs near the glass fire feature, and feeling a deep sense of psychological peace. I had no idea that while she was accepting my financial consulting and utilizing my resources to balance her studio's credit sheets, she was actively utilizing my clinical absence to cross the corridor and construct a parallel, parasitic relationship with my husband. They believed that the heavy, exhausting nature of my surgical career left my brain too sedated to notice the micro-behavioral deviations inside my own home. They treated my biological sacrifice as a convenient administrative window to liquidate my presence. Trust inside an elite professional social circle is often the most dangerous vulnerability because we assume that massive life-saving sacrifices and long-term milestones create a permanent moral boundary against malice. When you literally carve out a piece of your own anatomy to keep your partner alive, your brain automatically categorizes his actions as safe, leaving you entirely unprotected against a systematic deception. Have you ever realized that the person carrying your own organ inside them was using that renewed health to destroy your life? Tell me your experience below. The physical breakdown of their camouflage initialized at precisely 4:15 p.m. on a scorching Thursday afternoon. Julian had reached his 6-month post-operative clearance milestone, his blood metrics tracking at a state of perfect, unyielding health. I had been stuck at the hospital tower since dawn, managing an intensive series of complex surgical procedures that required continuous focus. During a brief 10-minute operational lull in the doctor's lounge, I opened our shared household tablet device to verify the monthly maintenance logs for our downtown luxury medical condo, a secondary property Julian used as a private recovery office during his heavy medication cycles. I launched the automated smart home security network application to ensure the climate control filters had been cycled by the staff. The screen buffered for 3 seconds. The real-time camera feed initialized. The camera lens was centered on the open-concept living space of the recovery suite, but the environment was not empty. Resting on the marble entryway counter were 2 unwashed crystal champagne flutes, their rims holding the residue of an expensive vintage sparkling white wine that Julian was strictly forbidden from consuming under his early post-transplant dietary guidelines. I adjusted the digital joystick control, panning the mechanical high-definition lens 90 degrees to the left toward the private master suite corridor. The bedroom door was resting halfway open. As the automated lens focus locked through the structural gap, the automated audio sensors picked up a faint, rhythmic sound, the distinct low-frequency pitch of Julian's voice carrying an intense level of private intimacy. The video stream rendered a catastrophic structural anomaly on my screen. The 2 individuals were not reviewing real estate files or managing medication schedules. Julian and Victoria were occupying the private suite, their actions displaying an absolute, unmistakable physical intimacy that erased every single layer of my biological devotion in the span of a fraction of a second. They were completely unhurried, entirely relaxed, operating with the calm confidence of individuals who believed my trauma shift kept me permanently trapped at the main hospital block until midnight. A life spent performing high-precision surgery teaches you that the moment your hands tremble or your brain falls into emotional panic, you lose control of the patient and give the defect room to expand. My pulse remained perfectly flat. My emerald green eyes narrowed into a cold, clinical target. I didn't drop my phone, I didn't scream down the hospital hallway, and I didn't drive to the condo to initiate a chaotic physical altercation. I simply activated the application's backup recording function, captured a pristine 3-minute digital file of the live stream, ensuring the timestamps, the local network destination, and their faces were perfectly logged into the firm's cloud backup. Once the evidence was secured under a permanent encryption protocol, I took a deep, steady breath, closed the application, and walked back into the operating theater to complete my scheduled shift with absolute freezing precision. The following morning, Julian's legal counsel delivered a formal divorce petition to my office, completely out of nowhere. The smooth, narcissistic arrogance of the document was staggering. He claimed the marriage had experienced an irreparable breakdown of compatibility, and because our original prenuptial agreement lacked a specific clause defining digital asset infidelity, he intended to claim 50% of our shared Manhattan penthouse equity. He believed his legal camouflage triage was absolute, entirely unaware that the surgeon who built his pulse had already mapped out his complete destruction. The subsequent dissolution process did not resemble a standard amicable New York divorce. It transformed into a massive, multi-layered civil and medical war that completely split the city's elite professional network down the center. On Monday morning, less than 48 hours after his legal notice arrived, my legal counsel delivered our comprehensive response brief to the New York Supreme Court. The flagship demand of the petition sent a shockwave through the entire legal community. I filed an aggressive, unprecedented civil restitution brief demanding either the immediate physical surgical extraction and return of my biological asset, my transplanted left kidney, or a direct, immediate $1.5 million financial compensation package for breach of the fundamental implied covenant of the marital contract. Julian's defense team spent 3 weeks in an absolute state of panic, calling emergency press blocks and attempting to claim before the judge that a human organ donation is legally classified as an irrevocable biological gift under federal law, meaning it cannot be subject to physical retrieval or financial evaluation during a matrimonial dissolution. They argued that my demand was a barbaric, unlawful invasion of his physical safety that should be dismissed from the record immediately. The courtroom was packed to absolute capacity during the final summary hearing. The ambient murmur of journalists, prominent medical directors, and corporate asset developers turned into a breathless vacuum as the presiding judge, a senior, unyielding legal authority, sat at his elevated bench and reviewed the file layouts. Tibbi ve hukuki olorak, the judge ruled, his voice echoing off the paneled walls with absolute finality. This court acknowledges that a transplanted human organ cannot be physically repossessed or subjected to surgical extraction under the medical safety codes of this state. An organ donation is structurally irreversible once integrated into a living patient. The judge paused, his eyes narrowing into a cold glare as he turned his gaze directly onto Julian's pale face. Anjak, the judge continued, his tone dropping into a bone-chilling resonance. This court will not allow a respondent to utilize a life-saving biological sacrifice funded entirely by his spouse's flesh to build an alternative asset framework for a parasite relationship. The evidence provided by the petitioner, the real-time network logs matching the exact recovery milestones, proves an intentional, calculated breach of the core marital covenant. While the organ remains in place, this court rules this transaction an absolute civil fraud. I hereby award the petitioner a direct $1.5 million financial restitution judgment, secured by the immediate liquidation of the respondent's entire commercial real estate equity and corporate portfolios. But the total financial liquidation of Julian's existence was only the primary sector of the audit. The collateral damage hit his professional standing with the exact same unyielding force. Following the judge's public ruling, the State Medical Ethics Board and the senior managing directors of every prominent hospital network in New York initialized an extraordinary compliance review. The elite medical community, the surgeons, the donors, and the corporate healthcare developers who funded Julian's investment projects viewed his actions as a profound, grotesque violation of human honor. Within 48 hours, his primary stakeholders pulled their capital out of his investment firm, rendering his commercial projects completely insolvent. The local country clubs permanently revoked his membership privileges, and his name became an absolute toxic liability across the entire southern and northern real estate networks. He was completely excommunicated from the elite social fabric he had spent his life trying to manipulate. His professional reputation completely flattened by the biological data string exposed in the courtroom. The final verification of his ruin materialized inside the high-end executive conference room of my law firm in downtown Manhattan. The legal teams had assembled to sign the closing transfer manifests for the asset titles and the $1.5 million judgment deeds, a formal, cold ritual that marked the absolute conclusion of the 6-month war. I didn't walk into that corporate space wearing a white lab coat or a rigid uniform. I stepped through the glass double doors wearing an exceptionally beautiful, gorgeous terracotta linen day dress with a clean square neckline and a structured, elegant silhouette that caught the ambient track lighting beautifully. It was a stunning, sophisticated dress designed for a high-end social setting, making me look radiant, effortlessly beautiful, and completely independent. My short, icy platinum blonde hair caught the clear light of the Manhattan skyline, and my emerald green eyes held a terrifying razor-sharp clarity. But the most striking transformation was not the terracotta dress. It was the expression on my face. My lips were turned upward into a powerful, quiet, slight smile of absolute victory. A calm, knowing Zafar Tebessumi that held no anger, no malice, and no remaining sorrow. It was the smile of an expert auditor who had tracked the biological anomaly, executed the protocol, and won every single piece of the board. Julian was sitting at the opposite end of the mahogany table, looking 30 years older, his tailored clothes loose against his frame, his dark hair disheveled, his face completely pale and hollow. He looked like a ghost trapped inside a corporate office. I walked slowly to the head of the table, my linen dress rustling softly against the leather chairs, my emerald green eyes locked onto Julian's trembling hands as I slid the final transfer documents across the wood. "Avery," Julian stammered, his voice thin, cracked, and completely stripped of his former smooth executive arrogance. "The court took the entire real estate portfolio to secure the $1.5 million judgment. The investment board terminated my director privileges, and because of the medical blacklisting, no developer in this city will even take a phone call from my office. You completely erased my entire life. Was it really worth destroying a man's career just because of a relationship milestone after my recovery?" I signed the bottom line of the transfer deed with a clean, unhurried stroke of my pen, closed the leather folder, and looked down at him from the head of the table, my powerful victory smile deepening with absolute, unvarnished indifference. "I didn't destroy your portfolio, Julian," I replied, my voice perfectly flat, carrying the cold finality of a system report. "I simply allowed the New York legal and ethical system to output the exact reality of the data you chose to enter into my recovery wing. You chose to sign a digital contract of your own betrayal while my own biology was keeping your heart beating. Enjoy the final compilation of your choices." I picked up my secure drive, turned on my heel, and walked out of the boardroom into the bright Manhattan sunlight. Behind me, the double doors clicked shut with a heavy, metallic finality, leaving the traitor completely broke, exposed, and isolated inside the vacuum of his own greed. My path finally stands on its own unshakable foundation. Do you know why I am telling you this story from the top of this skyscraper today? Because the predators and deceivers of this world want you to believe that if you are a regular, structured person who focuses on your data and trusts your family, you are too weak to defend your own life. They think because you are quiet, because you ignore their small slights while sacrificing your own biology to save them, they must be blind to their large conspiracies. They believe a gas-litted heart will always collapse into useless tears. But they do not understand the absolute, unalterable laws of patience and documentation. Your life does not belong to the people who try to manipulate your absence using your own bloodline. And you don't need a loud screaming match, a public scene, or a chaotic confrontation to execute absolute justice. You just need the cold, silent discipline to collect the data, secure the evidence, and wait for the exact moment to let their own greed pull the trigger on their existence. Julian thought he could steal my sanctuary because I was a quiet operator behind a surgical screen. He forgot the most basic rule of the system backups. The woman who manages the files always knows exactly how to liquidate the assets. I am Dr. Avery. The audit is finalized, the asset is secured, and my path finally stands on its own unshakable foundation. Now I have a final question for you, the person listening to my voice in the quiet of your own room tonight. If you discovered your partner was utilizing your own life-saving organ donation to conduct a secret affair with your neighbor, would you lose your temper and scream at him in the hospital ward? Or would you wait patiently for a court-ordered civil fraud brief to freeze his entire corporate asset structure and watch him get removed by investigators in front of his own board partners? Tell me your strategy in the comments below. I am analyzing your logic.